Greetings again, brethren, sisters, kind friends, and enemies. I was thinking last night as my study on the beginning of the Doctrine of Christ that we didn't look at the context of the second epistle of John. So let's look for just a moment at verse 1 of this little short epistle. The elder to the elect lady and her children, whom I love in the truth, and not I only, but also all that have knowledge of the truth. Now, if that's a little bit different, I'm not reading from the King James Version. I'm reading from the Geneva Bible, 1557. Older than the King James Version. Might as well be stated now that I'm certainly not King James only. You'll find me using it most of the time. You'll also find me quoting from it. But I'm not tied to it. Honestly, I prefer the Geneva. I even have Matthew's, which is Tyndale's, and I have all the modern versions, which we may turn to sometime, but not today. Notice John does not identify himself by name here, merely by a title, which everybody who is reading it in the original context, in the original sending of this epistle, would have known who it was. The elder. Did it mean John was an old man, or did it have reference to the office? Might be either. Although I do not assign a late date to the epistles of John, the Gospel of John, or the book of Revelation. If anybody wants more detail on that, I would suggest that they pick up a copy of John A.T. Robinson's Redating the New Testament, which you would think from a liberal Episcopalian bishop, he's probably going to say, oh, all these things were written in the 2nd century. Nobody whose name's on it actually wrote anything. Why, some of these things we can't trust. No, he says every one of them was written before 70 A.D. Every book that we have. And there's also a possibility that Clement's epistle to the church at Rome was written before 70 A.D. as well, but we shan't get into that. But if you want one of the best summaries of the early date of the epistles in the book of Revelation and the Gospels. Oh, he also wrote a book called The Priority of John. Everybody says, John wrote his gospel because Matthew, Mark, and Luke gave more of the historical details, and he thought it needed some spiritual stuff to it, so he wrote his gospel. Well, Robinson says, wait a minute. Is there anything in the book that makes us believe that? No. For why do we believe it? He argues that John may have been the first gospel written, and the others were written to fill in historical gaps. We're talking after the flesh. We know they were all written as inspired by God. They were all written when God inspired them, and they were all written for the purpose that God inspired them. Let none think that we are in any way negating inspiration of the original text of the New Testament. None of these are inspired. Geneva, King James, New English, New Revised Standard, New King James. By the way, I like New King James Version. I think it's very interesting. Get rid of all the study Bibles that have it and get just the regular one, and it shows you where the Greek text behind the modern versions differ from the Greek text behind the King James Version. And I think that's very interesting to see. And it gives it, we hear something somebody's quoting, it's not quite like we're used to hearing. Well, you can look at that and say, oh, okay, comes from the new versions. Well, all that kind of after the flesh, I guess, but not really, if we think about it. But it isn't pertinent to our text and our purpose today. And our purpose today is to look at the writing of this epistle. The elder. Tradition has it the elder is John. Tradition has held that from the beginning. To the elect lady. Now, there's all kinds of speculation on this. And I'm going to take the most conservative route there is. How about that? An old Baptist being conservative. Anyway. The elect lady and her children. Think of how many times in the New Testament, even in the Old Testament, how many times is Israel portrayed as a woman? How many times is the church portrayed as a woman? I believe John's writing to a local church, perhaps one of the 7 churches of Asia to whom he addressed the epistles at the beginning of the book of Revelation. Perhaps a different one. Anyway, it was in his circle, so to speak, in his area where they would know him by the elder. And the elect lady and her children is a local church called and set apart, a group of baptized believers who meet together for the worship of God and the edification of the body. John beheld the New Jerusalem come down from heaven as a bride prepared for her husband. One of the texts that I always loved in the Old Testament is in the Song of Solomon, where he says, "Who is this that cometh up from the wilderness, leaning on her beloved?" How many times do we see Israel portrayed as both a bride and a harlot? Notwithstanding the changes of law that have been made in recent years, a bride is a woman. So he's writing, the elder, to a church, her and her children, whom I love in the truth. That's a beautiful thing. That he loves her, not in the flesh, that he loves her, not if she does good, that he loves her in the truth. You know, many times when we look at members of churches, various churches all over the United States, sometimes we have to think, well, if this was after the flesh, I might not like you. But now I'm more than like you. I love you for the truth's sake. And that's what he's saying. That his love is not based on anything in the flesh. His love is not based on money. His love is not based on attractiveness. His love is not based on anything but the truth. Whom I love in the truth, period. Well, there ain't a truth. Don't you know anything? How about it? Is there truth or isn't there? Jesus asked that of Pilate. Or Pilate asked that of Jesus, excuse me. He says, what is truth? Jesus said, ye shall know the truth. Not a truth, but the truth. And the truth shall make you free. And what did he say was truth? My word is truth. It's an interesting thing to go through the New Testament. Just pick your book. I would say John's Gospel would be the best place to start. Look at what he says about truth and falsehood. Sometimes he doesn't even use the word. Like when he tells the Pharisees, you're your father the devil. That was truth. Do we believe that? I hope we do. Do we believe there are people out there now whose father is the devil? Yes, I hope we do, because there is. Do you think that human nature, do you think that humanity, do you think that these things have changed? Have we gotten that much better in the last, 2,000 years? That no more of the devil's children are out there? Why, sure they're out there. Wonderful things, aren't they? Wonderful folks. The truth as opposed to the lie or the error. What's the devil? He's a liar from the beginning and the father of liars. He's a liar, the father of it. A murderer from the beginning. So you got Satan, you got Jesus, you got God, and you got the arch enemy. The arch enemy is doing what? He's sowing tares among the wheat. He's walking about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. But let me tell you something. God looks at him and says, hitherto shalt thou go and no further. God told him on Job, he said, you know what? Touch all that he has, but boy, don't you touch him. Do you think Satan kind of snuck in a little stomach ache on Job in the midst of all that? Why, he could no more do that than he could create a world. No. So anyway, one is full of truth. It's full of grace and truth. Isn't that a beautiful thing? To be full of grace and to be full of truth. I'm going to bring this text in here because I think it fits. Jude talks about the faith once delivered unto the saints. That's truth. You with me? That's truth. That's which God gives you. That's which he shows you. That's which he reveals to you. That's truth. Let other things rise up. Let men say what they will. You know it because it's been taught to you in your heart. God, who commanded the light to shine out of darkness, hath shined, past tense, in our hearts to give light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. Who did it? I didn't do it. Did this preacher, Billy Graham, ever do that? I'll tell you one thing. That man got his theology corrected, whichever side of the gulf he's on. And I won't hazard a guess. But I will say this. His union and uniting with Antichrist, as it exists in the form of the Roman Catholic Church, makes me wonder and makes me question. See, I can't love him in the truth's sake because there's no truth there. I have been to congregations in the past where I was unknown, at least by sight, and they unknown to me. And I loved them from the beginning because they stood for the same truth that I trust had been revealed unto me. They had the same hope that had come down from above and been given to all the saints of God. We have an equal hope. Jesus Christ in you, the hope of glory. The doctrine of Christ is the truth. There is no truth outside of that. Not that's worth talking about. Sure, there's true things. 2 and 2 is 4. You plant a pea, you're going to get a pea vine. Plant a kernel of corn, you're going to get a corn stalk. Plant a heavenly seed, you're going to get a heavenly man. One who knows the truth. One who feels the truth. And one whom God's people all know has the truth. Because it's a common truth. You know, when the scripture in the book of Acts says they held all things common, was talking about possessions. But they held something else common. The mind of Christ. Christ in them. The glorious hope. The truth as it is in Jesus. The truth as it is in Jesus. John goes on to say, whom I love in the truth, and all who know the truth love you too. I hope that someday go back among the Lord's people, places I've been, in places I've never been, amongst brethren I know and amongst brethren I haven't met yet. I hope to be blessed to rejoice in the truth where it's found. Whom I love in the truth. May the Lord bless us to love in truth. In the truth. Not a fake love. One that pretends to love the truth and those who believe the truth. But in reality, those who love it, and those who show forth that love. And Lord bless us to think on these things, and Lord willing, we'll be back to verse 9 very shortly. I thank you.